Hey everyone, welcome back to Pescavita. Today I'm revisiting the first ever tying reel that I put out on Instagram. So I've been making tying reels specifically for Instagram and TikTok for a couple of years now, and I decided the other day to scroll through my timeline and see how some of my earlier flies compared to the flies that I make today. And trust me, there is some gold. If you scroll far enough back in my timeline, you find some seriously questionable flies. So this first tying reel is called the Chubby Amy. I think I was going for a mix between a Chubby Chernobyl and an Amy's ant. So let's take a look at it and see how bad this fly is. Alright, so it looks like I'm tying on a curved dry hook. That's a pretty good start. A couple different colors of foam. So that's kind of like the Amy's ant part, is the two layers of foam. Those rubber legs are a bit small. I think I would change them to maybe a larger rubber leg at this point. Okay, that polypropylene floating yarn wing is pretty sparse. And I used cactus chenille for the body on this one. I don't know if I would do that now. And that is a huge tie-in point. There is a ton of thread on this fly. You missed the dubbing. Wait, where's the dubbing? Ooh. Alright, well, it might catch a fish, but I think I have a couple new techniques and materials to show off to make this a better fly. So let's go over to my vise. I'll tie up my new version of the Chubby Amy. Alright, we're here at the vise. To tie up this fly, I'm going to be using an Ahrex FW531. This is a sedge dry hook from Ahrex. This is number 8. You could tie it in a couple of different sizes, but the main premise for any chubbies or Amy's ants, anything like that, is a general hopper / terrestrial imitation. So I really like to fish these flies in the summer, late summer, even early fall months. And I like to fish them in these big sizes because there's a lot of big bugs kind of wandering around at that point of the year. Alright, let's get started on this fly. The thread I am using today is some Semperfli Nano Silk. This is 30 denier. This is also the most common thread that I use for a lot of fly tying. I take that thread down the bend of the hook just a little bit, and the first material I'm tying in this time is a little bit of gold crystal flash. I'm going to pull out maybe 3 or 4 different pieces. I'm going to end up doubling this over on itself so it multiplies. But we're just going to take a couple strands, we'll fold them right in half, and then we'll give those a trim right at that halfway mark. Now that those are trimmed up, we'll go to the back of the fly, lay those down, get a couple of securing wraps over that crystal flash, and then double it over on itself. Alright, now the first thing I'm going to do is take some of this ice dub in golden brown, and I'm going to coat the entirety of the hook. The reason I'm doing this is because foam, as we use it in this fly, tends to spin around the hook shank quite a bit, and adding a little bit of ice dub, or really any kind of dub, helps ensure that foam doesn't just end up sliding all over the place. Now that our hook is coated and our foam will have a little bit of purchase, I clipped out 2 pieces of foam for this one. So I've got black, which I'll be using on the bottom, then I've got this yellow piece, which I'll be using for the top. We're going to start out with this black piece, and I'm just going to taper the ends of this a little bit. Give it a shape kind of similar to that, doesn't have to be too specific. Now we're going to take that and we are just going to schlep that right on top of the hook. Since this is a big terrestrial, I'll leave the tail a little bit longer than I would if I were tying this on, say, a size 14. Now I'm going to lift that foam up, bring my thread forward to where we ended those wraps with the dubbing. And I'm also going to get some wraps here and just secure this piece of foam down. I'm not going to crank too hard on this foam because we will be covering it up with a little bit of straggle, but I don't want to remove all of those little bulges because those do help with flotation on this fly. All right, with our yellow piece of foam, we're going to cut a V-notch into it. Your top foam should look something like that after you've given it a trim. I'm just gonna take this, put it right on top of that black foam and secure it down. Now for the wings on chubbies and a lot of different terrestrial flies, I've switched from polypropylene floating yarn to EP trigger point fiber. This is just a little bit more bushy, it fills in a wing really nicely, and it also has some really nice flotation properties too. So I'm gonna divvy out a hank about that big, and I'll get this trimmed out of the stock here. We're gonna take that wing and we're going to measure it out a little bit past the tail. And what I like to do when I secure this in is kind of flatten it out with my index finger, and then I'll take a couple securing wraps right on top. You can make any minute adjustments as necessary at this point. And then I'll take that EP trigger point fiber, double it over on itself, and you can see I've created a little bump here. So as I tighten the thread, I like to draw out the excess from that fiber, and then I'll give it a couple more locking wraps. Now we could just come in and trim this wing to size. And the next material we're adding are some rubber legs. In that original video, I didn't like the size of those round rubber legs, so we're going with some square rainbow shimmer legs for this one. I'll cut one strand out of this little pack here. So here's that strand, and I'm actually going to double this over and cut it in half as well. These will be the two leg sections for this fly. To tie in these legs, I'm just going to align it on the side of the fly, and I'll give it a little adjustment here. I only added about 2 wraps there, but I can pull the slack and get those tightened in. Then I just bring those legs around the front side. 2 wraps to get those in place. I'll come in, make that adjustment to where I want the legs to be. Make sure I've got that looking good, they're laying flat. Once those are in, we can put in a couple securing wraps. All right, to cover up those thread wraps, we're just gonna take a little bit more ice stub and dub a little noodle onto our thread and get those thread wraps covered up. All right, with everything covered up, we're going to move to in front of the yellow foam. And I like to either push this back, some people like to clip it down with a little hair clip just to keep everything out of the way. Whatever works for you, you're going to be working on this middle section next. At this point, you could go the traditional chubby route and just use more ice stub to fill in this body, but I'm using something really cool called the Synergy Micro Straggle. This is the black and gold color, and this comes from Uphaven Fly Fishing. So I'm gonna tease the loose end here off the card. I'll unravel a little bit, and I'm going to tie in this tip section. Just get that secured down. The tie-in point doesn't have to be super clean because all of this is getting covered up. We'll advance our thread to the front of that foam tie-in point. And to make things easy, I'm just gonna throw in a quick whip finish. Well, that was almost bad. And then I'll use the rotary feature on my vise just to spin this up pretty quickly. All right, we've got the body dressed, so we're going to take our thread, get that pinched down at the front. And we'll just cut that out. All right, now we can lose the clip or whatever you were using to hold back that foam. We'll advance that foam forward and we'll tie this down right up here. All right, and since we left a little bit of room on the hook, we're going to take our thread to right behind the eye of the hook. And I'm going to pinch this foam in my fingers and throw in another little pinch wrap here. And get both of those sheets of foam locked down. So you can see there's a bit of bulk up here at the front, but we're gonna keep this nice and clean. All right, we'll come back in with our EP trigger point fiber. I'm gonna make this wing a little bit longer than the last one. Double that over on itself, create a little bubble, and draw out the excess. Alright, now I'm just going to take a little bit of yellow / gold deer hair to emphasize this wing like I did in the first one. I'm going to chuck my hair in a stacker just because I like things nice and neat. If you're a renegade or a disorderly, you could skip this step. Now I'm going to measure this out a little bit, and I think I'm going to use a majority of this deer hair, but I do want to clean up this free edge a little bit. Now that I've got that cleaned up, I'm going to take my thread and spin it clockwise so that I can get as much purchase into this deer hair as possible. I'm going to lose a couple fibers in this transaction, but that's alright. I'll get that locked down nice and tight on top of the fly. Alright, with that deer hair wing in, this thing's starting to look outrageous already, but we'll come back in with our second set of rubber legs and get those tied in on the side. I'm just now realizing how ridiculous this fly is, but that's alright. Alright, now we're going to cover up more thread wraps with ice dub, and I also like doing this because it helps splay out these front legs a little bit. We'll just create a small dubbing noodle out of that gold ice dub and get that wrapped up to right behind the foam, and then work our thread backwards. Alright, so we got a nice little dubbing ball to cover up all those tie-ins. We're going to take this yellow foam and double it over onto itself. We're going to create a nice bulbous head using that yellow foam. Alright, this thing looks ridiculous, don't worry, we'll come in and clean it up soon. I'm just going to finish with a little bit more gold ice dub to cover up those final wraps we just made. Alright, now we can just take a whip finish to it. Throw in a couple of turns. Get this thing pinched off. Good lord. Alright, trimming time for this thing. We'll come into the front piece of foam, get that black trimmed up, and then I'll cut a couple angles in on each side of that black foam. Trim the legs off as well. Then with the yellow foam, I'll come in from one side and cut upwards and down from the other side. Clean up a couple of these deer hairs. Alright, and here you go. This is the Chubby Amy. Alright, here you go. This is the Chubby Amy. Honestly, I would probably just tie a Chubby, or I would tie an Amy's ant. Really don't have to combine them. But I will say this thing has plenty of floatability. I do like the deer hair wing on this one. It keeps that EP trigger point fiber laying down a little bit flatter to better look like a wing of a stonefly, for example. But anyway, I figured it would be cool to check out my first fly tying reel that I ever put on Instagram, try and recreate it now that I have maybe a little bit more experience. But I will say I would fish this thing at 9 out of 10 times more than I would the original. So thanks for tuning in to today's video. If you like this format, please let me know in the comments. Feel free to leave a like on the video, and if you haven't yet, please subscribe to Pescavita. I've got a ton of different content to share, and I try and put it out as often as I can. Until next time, I hope you all get out on the water. If you don't, give the Chubby Amy a try and let me know how it goes for you. We'll see you out there.